We ended our last lecture noting that in the fulfillment of Daniel 11 concerning the Greeks, Antiochus the Great had conquered Jerusalem and all Palestine, and now noticed that a new power, the Roman forces, had come on the scene and was threatening him. So Antiochus is going to go to Greece to respond to that threat. This was prophesied by Daniel in the 17th verse. He said, "He, that is Antiochus the Great, shall also set his face to enter Greece with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones," that were the Jews who were now supporting him, "with him. Thus shall he do to incorporate Greece into his dominion, by which the Romans, who had recently proclaimed it free, would be stirred up against him. Therefore, to secure the neutrality of Egypt, he shall give Ptolemy Epiphanes to him there. He shall give Ptolemy Epiphanes, the daughter of women, that is, Antiochus' daughter, Cleopatra the First, to wife, corrupting her, to betray him by resigning to him, that is to Antiochus, Coele, Syria, and Palestine as her dowry, but on condition that he should receive half the revenues. Thus, the land of Israel was given over as a bribe to bind Cleopatra to her father's interest, that she might influence Epiphanes, her husband, either to remain neutral or to declare against the Romans, who were at that time acting as his protectors. But she shall not stand on his side. She wouldn't be on Antiochus' side, neither be for him, but should join with her husband in congratulating the Roman Senate on the victory they had gained over her father at Thermopylae, and that battle was in BC 191, the first time that the Greeks fought the Romans. So this verse changes the course of the Greek wars by the introduction of a new force who has entered upon the battlefield. That new force, of course, was Rome. While Antiochus was conquering all of Greece for himself, the Roman Senate declared Greece to be a free state. This was destined to set up a war, and Antiochus knew it. So he gave his daughter, Cleopatra the First, to Ptolemy Epiphanes, the king of the south, to wife, and promised her the return of Coele, Syria, and Palestine as her dowry, with two conditions. First condition was he was to receive 50% of the revenue from that area, and second, that she would support Antiochus, king of the north, possibly even assisting him in his upcoming war, and at minimal declaring the south to be neutral. Cleopatra did neither. Rather, she declared for her husband and for the interest in Egypt, and courted the Roman support for Egypt's freedom from Antiochus. The first battle between Rome and the northern king was at Thermopylae, and the Romans won that one, driving Antiochus all the way out of Greece and back into Asia Minor, what we would today call Turkey. This is the last part of the paraphrase by Brother Thomas. The Romans then went on to deal Antiochus a total defeat in Asia Minor at the town called Magnesia. Now, it is no doubt simple to take the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy of this new force, Rome, who defeats the king of the north and then conquers the whole world, becoming the fourth metal of Nebuchadnezzar's image, and project that out to the time of the end. Obviously, the new and totally unexpected army which shall arrive on the scene at the time of the end is the army commanded by Christ with his saints. Remember that Christ and the saints have been in the earth from before that first peace treaty was made and then broken. During these wars, they have been going through judgment, likely a period of 10 years, broken up into first 3 years of judgment, and that would be followed with 1 year of celebrating the marriage with the Lamb for those who were righteous, and then years 2 through 7 for the preparation, which includes having embarked on their first goal, that of making the desert blossom like a rose. Brother Thomas wrote, How then doth Yahweh, the man of war, so styled by Moses in Exodus 15:3, occupy his time after his development as the one angel is complete? Let the following testimonies enlighten us. So note from this section of Eureka called The Gathering to Armageddon that he is discussing how the one angel, that is, the army of the glorified saints, how they occupy their time immediately after the judgment period is over. He advances these verses which show their work. In Isaiah 43 at verse 19 we read, "Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it? I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. The beasts of the field shall honor me, and dragons and the owls, because I give waters in the wilderness and rivers in the desert, to give drink to my people, my chosen. This people have I formed for myself. They shall show forth my praise." Now, in order for Jesus to make a way in the wilderness and create rivers in the deserts, and for the beasts of the deserts, which is a symbolical reference to the Arabs inhabiting that region, in order to get them to honor the chosen one, which is Christ, they must first come under his control. And again of this time, Isaiah prophesied in the 35th chapter, "The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom like a rose. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice, even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it, and excellency of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord and the excellency of our God." Again in Isaiah 41, "I will open rivers in the high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the shittim tree, and the myrtle, and the oil tree. I will set in the desert the fir tree, and the pine, and the box tree together, that they may see and know and consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord hath done this, and the Holy One of Israel hath created it." And finally, in Isaiah 42, "Let the wilderness and the cities thereof lift up their voice, the villages that Kedar doth inhabit. Let the inhabitants of the rock sing. Let them shout from the top of the mountains. Let them give glory unto the Lord and declare his praise in the islands. The Lord shall go forth as a mighty man. He shall stir up jealousy like a man of war. He shall cry, yea, roar. He shall prevail against his enemies." Now it's obvious that before these verses can be fulfilled, that is, before the dwellers of the deserts and the rocks and the wilderness can give glory to God, they must themselves be first subject to the conquering force of Christ and the saints. So prior to involving himself as a mighty man in the battles taking place between the northern and southern powers, Jesus conquers the Arabian Peninsula for himself. Excuse me, I went one verse too far. We'll just go to this one and have to go back. Jesus conquers the Arabian Peninsula for himself, shown in green on this map, rallying the Arabs to obey him and become part of his army who will conquer the world. But just as Rome had done in Greece, it will not be so much a conquering as a setting free. The Arabs, facing the prospect of Shiite vengeance on themselves from vengeful and victorious Iran and Iraq and Syria, will not be slow to accept the Messiah. And to this end, there is a remarkable feature in the religion of Islam. Islam teaches that Jesus was taken by God to heaven, and that at the last hour, as they call it, Jesus will return to earth to fight the Antichrist and conquer Jerusalem. Observe this from the writings called the Criticism of Hadith. Quoting now, "The whole body of Muslims through the centuries have held that at the end of the age, a man of the family of the prophets must appear who will strengthen religion and make justice manifest. The Muslims will follow him, and he will gain possession of the Muslim kingdoms and be called Almighty. Al-Dajjal, the Antichrist, will come, and afterwards the signs of the last hour indicated in the Sahih. Then Jesus will descend from heaven and kill Al-Dajjal, or as some say, will descend with him, with Al-Mahdi, and help to kill Al-Dajjal, and will have the Mahdi as Imam in prayer. And again, from the same book, the Ahlul Kalam assert that the two following hadith are contradictory and mutually exclusive, namely, there will be no prophet after me and no religion after my religion. The lawful and the unlawful will be what God hath permitted and forbidden according to my words until the last day. And the second point from the same book, the Messiah will descend and slay swine, break the cross, and add to the lawful. And from Aisha say of the apostle of God, the seal of the prophets, do not say there will be no prophet after him. Now, the writer of the Hadith maintains that there is no contradiction whatever in these statements, for the Messiah was an earlier prophet whom God took up to himself, and will send him down again at the end of the age as a sign of the hour. As God has said, verily, he shall be a sign of the hour. End of quotes. Now then we see from the Quran that the Muslims are looking for Jesus to return to the earth at the last hour and battle Al-Dajjal, or the Antichrist. Jesus, with Al-Mahdi, is believed to descend and gain possession of the Muslim kingdoms. And all this is according to the superstition of the Quran. Will it then seem unusual to the Arabians in the deserts when Jesus of Nazareth enters the Arabian Peninsula and begins to take control of the Arab states of the peninsula, particularly those lying around the Persian Gulf? Well, not at all. To many living there, it will appear to be what has been prophesied in the Quran all along. If the Arabs of the peninsula are willing to follow Jesus and the saints after he has conquered the region, why won't the Arabs from all regions follow Jesus? And the answer is quite simple. Just as there are many forms of the Christian religion, like Catholic, Methodist, and Baptist, etc., there are many similar branches of the Muslim religions, like the Baths, the Sunnis, and the Shiites. As we previously explained, these groups have different understandings of the Quran, which shapes their view and their teachings and their perception of prophecy. There is more than enough discussion about what it is that Jesus will do to cause the religious leaders in the northern groups and in the southern groups to oppose the position of their Arab brethren in the peninsula. For instance, we read this in one Muslim criticism concerning the return of Jesus. Quoting now, "And when the Messiah descends, he will not abrogate anything that Muhammad the apostle of God commanded, nor will the imam from his religion be first, but he will set Muhammad first and pray behind him." Well, when Jesus returns, that simply will not happen. Though Muhammad claimed that the Jewish Old Testament, along with the Gospels, as delivered by the apostles, were the inspired work of God, and even though Muhammad appears to have had a better understanding of those works than his Christian counterparts, there is still so much objectionable in his faith and writings that they can be called nothing more than superstition. So the Arabs who align themselves with the north, and perhaps the south, will find enough reasons in the Quran to oppose that new power in Arabia, Christ and the saints. Now, all these events are happening on the western side of the Persian Gulf, probably pushing up into Iraq. These are the precursors to the greater than Antiochus Gog noticing that there is a new force in the earth subjugating the non-aligned Arab states. While the North has taken a substantial lead in the battles between the two mighty forces, the King of the North and the King of the South, a third power arises in their midst. Jesus, the Son of God, shows himself to the earth in the deserts of Sinai. As Jesus himself prophesied, his kingdom will start out very small, like the seed of a mustard tree, and then grow into a huge tree. The Arabs of the deserts, those of the Arabian Peninsula, become Jesus' tool for the growth of that mustard seed. When Antiochus saw the burgeoning power just outside his empire, such as he did here, that little red circle being where the rebellion against Antiochus began, he immediately went to address it. Might we then expect that the growing power of the eastern desert will catch the attention of Gog and his allies, who will then go forth to put the tents of Cushan and the curtains of the land of Midian in turmoil? Now the prophet Habakkuk wrote, God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran, Selah. His glory covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. And his brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hand, and there was the hiding of his power. Before him went the pestilence, and burning coals went forth at his feet. He stood and measured the earth. He beheld and drove asunder the nations, and the everlasting mountains were scattered. The perpetual hills did bow. His ways are everlasting. I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction, and the curtains in the land of Midian did tremble. Now this song is often equated by most commentators with the Song of Moses. And the way it is translated led people to believe that this is the very Song of Moses when he entered into the Holy Land. And certainly there are similarities. But it is not the Song of Moses, for it is a prophecy. Instead of saying, as is translated, God came in from Teman, the text should be translated, El shall come in from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. You see, it's a future event, not a past history, that's being described by Habakkuk. The confusion comes from the fact that when Jesus leads his army into the Holy Land, he will do so following that same path that Moses took when he came up out of Egypt with the children of Israel. So the commentators, not looking for the return of Christ, confuse these things. But the result is clear. Just as Antiochus suffered a defeat at Thermopylae, and then a total removal from the land and back to his earlier position, might we not expect the same thing to happen to Gog? The text of Habakkuk suggests a great victory for Christ and the saints. In Habakkuk 3 we read, Thou didst march through the land in indignation. Thou didst thresh the heathen in anger. Thou wentest forth for the salvation of thy people, even for salvation with thine anointed. Thou woundest the head out of the house of the wicked by discovering the foundation of the neck, Selah. Thou didst strike through with his staves the head of his villages. They came out as a whirlwind to scatter me. Their rejoicing was as to devour the poor secretly. Now there's an interesting note in that 17th verse. When Antiochus comes to the battle, he comes with upright ones, or those Jews who foolishly think they can side with the socialist movement. Several other texts do not translate it, the upright ones with him, but rather translate it, bringing with him a proposal of peace. This would be a reference to the marriage of Antiochus' daughter Cleopatra to Ptolemy Epiphanes, which was intended to bring peace between the north and south, which, as we previously noted, Cleopatra failed to keep. We might see then something equivalent to a reversal of the South's attitude towards Christ's new army when it comes on the scene. Gog tries to gain the support of the South in fighting this new foe. But whatever agreement comes to be, it fails, and the South will no longer offer any support to the Northern Alliance against the growing new force, which the Southern kings will recognize as having the potential to stop that northern growing power. We now come to Daniel 11 and 18 and the defeat of Antiochus by the Roman general Scipio Asiaticus. For a paraphrase of this verse, Brother Thomas wrote, After this shall he, Antiochus, at the earnest solicitation of the Italians, turn his face unto the isles of Greece, and shall take many. But a prince for his own behalf, a military commander, Kotzin, Scipio, the Roman council, shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach or disgrace, he, Scipio, shall cause it to turn upon Antiochus by defeating him at Mount Sipylus and repulsing him from every part of Asia Minor. As a condition of peace, the Romans required him to pay 15,000 talents, 500 down, and 2,500 on the ratification of the treaty, and the rest in 12 years at 1,000 talents per annum. These terms were acceded to by Antiochus. Here is the defeat of Antiochus by a new world power, Rome, who typifies Christ's victory in the eastern deserts of Cushan and Midian. Now Antiochus returned to his own land, where eventually he was killed, as prophesied in the 19th verse. We read there, "Then he, Antiochus, shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found." Now the following verses 20 through 23, detail the events following Antiochus' death. They detail mounds of intrigue and deceit, which are likely to happen, but in an entirely different manner at the time of the end. We could not possibly attempt to speculate on what these things may be. But to summarize those verses then, Antiochus the Great was required to pay significant reparations to the Romans following his defeat at Magnesia. To do this, he robbed wealth from anywhere he could find it. Ultimately, he was killed while robbing a pagan temple. His son, Seleucus IV, Philopator, took over and paid off the debt. And when he had the debt paid off, he was poisoned by his prime minister, Heliodorus, who attempted to take the Seleucid throne. Now, one of the conditions Rome had placed on Antiochus the Great was that one of his sons had to remain in Rome as an unconfined prisoner to help Rome in keeping Antiochus in line. That prisoner, while Antiochus the Great was alive, was Antiochus Epiphanes. But when Seleucus, the elder son of Antiochus the Great, came to power, Antiochus Epiphanes was set free, and Demetrius, Seleucus's oldest son, was sent to Rome as a prisoner. When Seleucus was killed by Heliodorus, Antiochus Epiphanes went to the Seleucid kingdom, in theory, to settle in favor of the Seleucid kingdom. Antiochus Epiphanes displaced Heliodorus and assumed the throne, though it was not his, it rightfully belonged to Demetrius. But he assumed the throne, and initially associating a younger man named Antiochus, the younger brother of Demetrius, and he assumed the kingdom with him as co-king for a while. Demetrius, the proper heir, remained a hostage in Rome. Now the Romans had become either fond or amused at Antiochus Epiphanes while he was in Rome. And so they assisted him in keeping the throne from Demetrius by refusing to set Demetrius free. And that brings us to the 24th verse. By deceit, he, Antiochus Epiphanes, shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, to which he reduces Egypt. And he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. Namely, he shall scatter among them the prey, the spoil, the riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds of Egypt, even for a time. Knowing the power of Rome, Antiochus Epiphanes knew that he needed to strengthen himself with all the wealth of Egypt if he was ever going to challenge the position of Rome. The attempted peace agreement through the marriage of Cleopatra to Ptolemy Epiphanes had failed miserably, and Antiochus thought the time was right now to actually conquer Egypt. In the time of the end, we are told that God gives Egypt as a ransom for Israel. In Isaiah 43:3 we read, "For I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel, thy Savior. I gave Egypt for thy ransom, Ethiopia and Sheba for thee." Now a ransom is something given that someone would go free. Israel, as we said earlier, was in the process of being utterly destroyed by the atheistic and socialistic northern hosts, who are determined to destroy all Jews to prove that there is no God. But the rise of a new power in the earth presses upon Gog the need to expand his power to address this new threat. Also, coupled with the need to expand, Gog notices there's a lot of dissension in the southern camp. And this convinces him that the time has arrived for him to take control of Egypt. These situations are created by God. And so God gives Egypt to Gog as a ransom to alleviate some of the suffering of the Jews, if only for a while. Historically, Ptolemy Philometor, the son of Ptolemy Epiphanes and Cleopatra I, was now on the Egyptian throne, having married his own sister, Cleopatra II. So we come to the battle for Egypt in the 25th verse. We read there, "And he, Antiochus Epiphanes, shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south, Ptolemy Philometor, with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle, and with a very great army and a mighty army. But he," that is Philometor, "shall not stand. For they, the Alexandrians, seeing him in the hands of Antiochus and lost to them, shall forecast devices against him, and place the crown of Egypt upon the head of his brother, Ptolemy Euergetes." The Alexandrians were those members of the royal family who were living in Egypt in Alexandria, while Philometor was governing from Memphis. Antiochus Epiphanes handily defeated the armies of Egypt. He was now the dominant power in Egypt. But he chose to leave Philometor on the throne as king, demanding of him that he should be a puppet governor of Egypt for him, that he might get the wealth of Egypt and prepare himself to battle Rome. But in Alexandria, a city Antiochus had not taken, Ptolemy Euergetes, Philometor's younger brother, governed. And that leads us to the 26th and 27th verse, which describes the turmoil which takes place in Egypt at that time. We read there, "Yea, they that feed of the portion of his," that's Philometor's meat, "shall destroy him," that's his court. "And his, Antiochus's army, shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. But both of these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. For the end shall be at the appointed time," or time appointed. It is hard to determine who the two kings who lie to each other are. Most commentators suggest that it's Antiochus and Philometor. They definitely were lying to each other. Antiochus was pretending to be preserving Philometor's crown for himself, for Philometor. And Philometor was agreeing to submit to Antiochus, all the while scheming as how to get out from underneath the control of the northern king. For that reason, I think Antiochus and Philometor remain the most natural identification. But it's worth remembering that at precisely this time, Egypt itself had two rival Ptolemaic kings, each maneuvering against the other. The two southern brother kings, Philometor and Euergetes, were also terribly suspicious of each other and appeared to be lying to each other about the situation in Egypt. Philometor was assisted by Antiochus in ruling in Memphis, while Euergetes was repelling Antiochus and ruling in Alexandria. The divide between the Ptolemy brothers and the belief that he controlled Egypt through the rightful king Philometor allowed Antiochus Epiphanes to return home to stabilize things in his growing empire. Which brings us to verse 28. "Then shall he, Antiochus Epiphanes, return to his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits or terrible things against Jerusalem, taking it by storm, butchering 80,000 men, making 40,000 prisoners, and causing a like number to be sold for slaves. And then shall he return to his own land, laden with the spoils of the temple, amounting to 1,800 temples, or 270,000 pounds, I guess, at that time. Antiochus returns to Jerusalem to find the city in rebellion concerning the priesthood. Onias had been the rightful high priest. His brother Joshua, who had changed his name to the Greek form Jason, bought the priesthood from Antiochus, and he deposed his brother Onias. After a few years, Jason sent a man named Menelaus to Antioch to pay the tribute. Instead, Menelaus offered to pay Antiochus a greater sum for the priesthood, and Antiochus accepted. Menelaus, on top to make everything worse, was a Benjamite. This created factions in Jerusalem. However, Menelaus could not come up with the new tribute he had promised. So he tried to sell the gold of the temple to pay the tribute, which infuriated the Jews. Then a rumor came that Antiochus had been killed while fighting in Egypt. Jason saw this as his opportunity to take back the priesthood, and he drove Menelaus out of Jerusalem. Now, when Antiochus does return, he viewed the rebellion in Jerusalem and the removal of his appointed high priest as a direct attack on his authority. Hence, he brutally put down the rebellion, though at this time he doesn't appear to be as hostile to the Jewish faith as he later becomes. He views it more as a political rebellion rather than one with religious overtones. This is a further prophecy of the great slaughter of the Jews, which will take place under the oppression of the king of the north. But once back in Antioch, Antioch Epiphanes finds the two Ptolemaic kings have reconciled, and Egypt is in a united rebellion. He is determined now to finish his destruction of Egypt. He descends again into Egypt. Now, these two invasions by Antiochus Epiphanes are both the result of the inner turmoils which existed in Egypt. And in the latter-day application, I believe God will similarly use turmoil in the south to draw Gog's attention away from Israel. In that sense, Egypt becomes the ransom. The intent of God creating this turmoil in the south is to lessen the persecution of the Jews, which had been taking place in Israel since the original invasion by Antiochus the Great. While focusing on Egypt, the northern kings would not be focusing on the Jews. And this brings us to Antiochus's second invasion at Daniel 11:29. At the time appointed, under the pretense of restoring Philometor to the throne, he, that is Antiochus Epiphanes, shall return and come toward the south against Alexandria to besiege it. But it, the second invasion, shall not be as the former or as the latter. Understanding that the two brothers have united, Antiochus led a powerful army into Memphis for that purpose of subduing that country. Having nearly accomplished his project, he then marched towards Alexandria, which was the only obstacle to him becoming the absolute master of Egypt. But this battle ends differently than the first. Daniel 11:30 tells us, "For the ships of Chittim shall come against him. Therefore shall he be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant." Antiochus's invasion into Egypt was stopped by Rome. Daniel said that the ships of Chittim came against Antiochus. The Roman embassy, sent at the request of the Ptolemies, met Antiochus about a mile from Alexandria. They had left Rome with the utmost diligence. When they arrived at Delos, they found a fleet of Macedonian or Greek ships, on board of which they embarked for Alexandria. And they arrived just at the crisis of Antiochus's approach to Alexandria. These were Roman soldiers under the command of an old friend of Antiochus, Popilius, who met him and immediately demanded his retreat. Antiochus told him that he had to think about it. Popilius drew a circle around Antiochus in the sand with his sword and told him he demanded an answer by the time he stepped out of that circle. Antiochus reluctantly agreed. Popilius and Antiochus then renewed their old friendship, and Antiochus returned back to Jerusalem, where he now executed the worst torments on the Jewish people. Thus, his invasion terminated very different from the former. The antitypical ships of Chittim in the latter days will be the beginning of the march of the rainbowed angel, Christ and the saints, descending into Egypt, confronting the aggressions of the king of the north, and freeing the Jews who have been driven there, trying to escape Gog's persecutions and genocides, which have been taking place in Israel, and then leading them out of Egypt by way of the path of Moses. Now, if this interpretation is right, we shouldn't have to depend on Daniel alone. We ought to find other prophets describing Christ's descent into Egypt and another Exodus to follow. And we do find such things. In Isaiah 19 we read, "And the burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and he shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it." And in Micah 7 and 15 we read, "According to the days of thy coming out of the land of Egypt will I show unto him marvelous things. The nations shall see and be confounded at all their might, and they shall lay their hand upon their mouths. Their ears shall be deaf. They shall lick the dust like a serpent. They shall move out of the holes like worms of the earth. They shall be afraid of the Lord our God, and shall fear because of thee." The Jews who have escaped Israel, and perhaps some who had been sold into slavery in the south, will be rescued by the descent of Christ into Egypt. We read of this in Isaiah 6 when speaking of the hopelessness of Israel. Isaiah laments, "Then said I, Lord, how long?" And he answered, "Until the cities be wasted without inhabitant, and the houses without a man, and the land be utterly desolate. And the Lord have removed men far away, and there shall be great forsaking in the midst of the land." You see, that's how desolate and terrible the destructions are going to be by the king of the north. "But yet in it shall be a tenth, and it shall return, and shall be eaten as a teil tree and as an oak, whose substance is in them. When they cast their leaves, so the holy seed shall be the substance thereof." Christ and the saints go into Egypt and grab that tenth of the Jewish population who's been driven there and bring them out on the path of Moses. Now, if the Mosaic pattern is followed completely, we may even see the extraordinary spectacle of the pursuing enemy following them into the divided waters as Pharaoh did. Moses' march begins by crossing the Red Sea, and it seems this future event will repeat that. Habakkuk says in Habakkuk 3:13, "Thou wentest forth for the salvation of thy people, even for salvation with thine anointed. Thou woundedst the head out of the house of the wicked by discovering the foundation under the neck, Selah. Thou didst strike through with his staves the head of his villages. They came out as a whirlwind to scatter me. Their rejoicing was to devour the poor secretly. Thou didst walk through the sea with thine horses, through the heap of great waters." We have already discussed how the third chapter of Habakkuk is future, though translators all think it referred to the past. But it's hard to imagine how rebellious the population of the earth will have become, and how ignorant of the scriptures they truly must be, that they will see the Red Sea open and defiantly walk into it to their own destruction, because they are following the Jews that they hate for no reason other than they hate God. Zechariah similarly prophesies in Zechariah 10, "I will bring them again also out of the land of Egypt, and gather them out of Assyria, and I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon, and place shall not be found for them. And he shall pass through the sea with affliction, and shall smite the waves of the sea, and all the deeps of the river shall dry up, and the pride of Assyria shall be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt shall depart away." Now, Christ and the saints Having fully gained the attention of Gog, that northern host, he retreats to Jerusalem to prepare for the final battle. And the Jewish persecution now renews in earnest. Daniel tells us, an arm shall stand on his part. It's under Apollonius. He was a Greek teacher of paganism that Antiochus Epiphanes used to teach the Jews how to be good pagans. And they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and they shall take away the daily sacrifice. And they shall place a statue of the Olympian Jupiter in the temple, and a strong garrison in the castle to command it, the abomination that maketh desolate. As soon as Antiochus Epiphanes was returned to Antioch, he published a decree by which all his subjects were required to conform to the religion of the state. This was aimed chiefly at the Jews, whose religion he was now resolved to obliterate. Athenius, a man advanced in years and extremely well-versed in all the ceremonies of Grecian idolatry, was commissioned to carry the edict into effect in Judea and Samaria. As soon as he arrived at Jerusalem, he began suppressing the daily or the morning sacrifice, and all the observances of the Mosaic law were finished. He caused the Sabbaths and other festivals to be profaned. He forbade the circumcision of children. He carried off and burned all copies of the law and the prophets wherever they could be found. And he put to death whoever acted contrary to the decree of the king. To establish it sooner in every part of the nation, altars and chapels were filled with idols and were erected in every city, and sacred groves were planted. Officers were appointed over those who caused the people generally to offer sacrifices in them every month on the day of the month in which the king was born. And they made him to eat swine's flesh, and other unclean animals were sacrificed there. The temple, Jerusalem, was dedicated to Jupiter Olympus, whose statue was placed in it. In Daniel 11:32 we read, "And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits." So Gog, after the type of Antiochus Epiphanes, returns to Jerusalem and utterly destroys the Jews. Antiochus demanded the Jews submit to Grecian idolatry. No doubt Gog will demand the Jews to submit to the northern ordinances, which will likely be atheism. And the prophecy indicates some will cooperate with Gog, thinking it a way to save themselves. Whatever the case, Gog now returns to Jerusalem and awaits the arrival of his new nemesis, Christ and the saints, for their battle to take place on the Mount of Olives in preparation for the battle of the great day of God Almighty in the Kidron Valley on the east side of Jerusalem. And we will finish there for this week.